Robb Stark stood on the ramparts of River Run, the letter from his scouts clutched in his hand. The Lannisters had grown bold, pushing deeper into the Riverlands, their supply lines thick with gold and grain from the Westerlands. Every move Tywin. Lannister made screamed confidence, and why wouldn't it? Casterly Rock, the impenetrable fortress of his house, remained untouched, secure, and far from the front lines. That, Robb realized, was the Lannisters' weakness. As his bannermen gathered in the war tent, Robb made the boldest decision of the war yet. "We march west," he said. "Not to Harrenhal, not to King's Landing. We strike at the heart. We take Casterly Rock." There was silence, then murmurs, then argument. Greatjon Umber slammed his fist on the table. "Madness!" he barked. "The rock has never fallen, and we'd be too deep behind enemy lines. We'd be cut off." Robb looked around, his voice steady. "Tywin expects me to keep playing his game. Strike, retreat, defend, repeat. But if we take his seat of power, we destroy his leverage. We shake the Lannisters to their very core." Catelyn Stark, still grieving for her husband and worried for her son, opposed it. "And if you fail, you die far from home and the North is lost." But Robb had made up his mind. Within the week, under cover of night and misinformation, the young Wolf began the march west. He split his forces, keeping Rose Bolton in the Riverlands to maintain pressure and sending a smaller force with the Blackfish to bait Tywin southward. With the help of sympathizers in the Westerlands, minor houses that resented Lannister, taxes. Robb's army passed through lesser-known mountain passes. They raided Lannister outposts, seized caravans, and spread fear. The closer they came to the Rock, the more the myth of its invincibility cracked. By the time they reached the great Golden Fortress, the defenders were unprepared. Casterly Rock was not built for a siege from the west. Its western face, the steep cliffs that met the Sunset Sea, had been deemed impenetrable for centuries. But Robb had something Tywin did not: speed, surprise, and Theon Greyjoy. Theon, still desperate to prove his loyalty, brought his knowledge of seafaring and Westerosi coastlines. With captured Lannister ships, Robb launched a bold night assault. A hand-picked group of Northmen and Ironborn climbed the western cliffs, the same route Lan the Clever had supposedly used centuries before. The climb was brutal. Men fell to their deaths. Waves smashed against the rock face, the wind tore at ropes, but by dawn they had reached the inner tunnels, abandoned and forgotten smuggler routes. The battle inside was bloody and quick. Lannister guards, roused from sleep, found steel in their beds. The gold mines echoed with the screams of dying men. Robb led the assault himself, sword flashing, his direwolf Grey Wind tearing through lines like a ghost. Within 2 days, the Red Lion banners were torn down. The direwolf of House Stark flew above Casterly Rock. Word spread like wildfire. Lords of the Westerlands trembled. Tywin, en route to Harrenhal, received the news with deadly silence. For the first time in years, the Warden of the West looked afraid. In King's Landing, Cersei screamed at her small council, while Joffrey threatened to burn the Riverlands to the ground. But behind their gold masks, even the Lannister loyalists whispered, "The Rock has fallen. The North remembers, and in the North, hope returned." Farmers lifted their heads. Blacksmiths sang as they forged blades. The Starks had struck a blow not just of war, but of legend. But Robb knew better than to celebrate. Holding the Rock would be harder than taking it. And Tywin Lannister was not a man who forgave or forgot. The halls of Casterly Rock echoed with the footsteps of strangers. Northern men, grim and weathered, patrolled its golden corridors, wary of hidden traps and sudden vengeance. The once proud Lannister stronghold now wore a cloak of northern steel and ice. But even as the banners changed, the air in the Rock remained heavy, ancient, defiant, and whispering promises of blood. Robb Stark stood in the chambers of the late Lord Tytos Lannister, now converted into his war room. Maps lay sprawled across tables, with pieces marking enemy movements. Gray wind lay beside the hearth, eyes glowing in the firelight. Sir Brynden Tully, the Blackfish, entered with news. "We've begun rationing the grain stores," he said. "Enough to last us through a short siege. Maybe less if the Westerlands turn hostile." Robb didn't look up. "And the raven from Moat Cailin?" Still no word from the north. Brynden replied, "If Roose Bolton is loyal, he'll hold the neck. If not—" He trailed off, Robb's fist clenched. "Then we burn our way back." But they both knew it wasn't so simple. Already, loyalist houses around Casterly Rock, Crakehall, Lefford, Brax, had begun raising levies. Not all Westerlanders feared the Starks. Some saw opportunity in chaos, and Tywin would not rest. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, the reaction was more severe. Cersei Lannister's fury could not be contained. "You let that northern pup defile our home!" she shrieked at the small council. "You swore the rock could not fall!" Littlefinger only smiled thinly. "It seems Lord Stark values boldness over tradition, but occupying is not the same as ruling." Varys folded his hands. "And yet, the common people are whispering of a northern king who dares to slay lions in their den. The realm is watching, Your Grace." Tyrion, now returned to the city, spoke last. "Robb Stark did what none have done in living memory. That deserves respect and fear." He turned to his sister. "If father survives this war, he'll come for the rock. But make no mistake, Robb has already won a kind of victory. He made the Lannisters bleed where we thought we were untouchable. Back in the Westerlands, Robb sent ravens to every bannerman of House Lannister. Some were ignored. Some returned with threats. But a few, House Rayne's last cousins in hiding, remnants of broken Westerlands houses, sent cautious replies. And from Deep Den came Sir Davin Lannister, Tywin's cousin, under a banner of truce. They met in the audience chamber, once adorned with red and gold lion banners, now stark and bare. "You have guts, boy," Davin said, eyeing Robb. "I'll give you that. No one thought the rock could fall." "It didn't fall," Robb replied coolly. "It opened its doors to justice. You hold it for now. But the rock isn't just stone and tunnels. It's legacy. And that legacy has teeth," Robb offered. "Him wine." "Then let them bite." Davin studied him. "You want peace? Surrender. Or marry a Westerland girl. Unite the houses." Robb's jaw tightened. "I'll not marry a Lannister. I'll not play politics with my father's ghost." Davin left with no agreement, but the seed was planted. Rumors of a northern king ruling the rock, offering fair. Rule began to spread. Still, the price of such conquest was steep. The garrison left behind to hold the rock was stretched thin. Raiders attacked supply lines. Mercenaries loyal to gold, not oaths, prowled the mountains. And then, the first raven from Roose Bolton arrived. "Moat Cailin holds," the letter read, "but trouble brews in the north. No more, no less." Robb handed it to Brynden. "Bolton speaks in riddles. I don't trust it." Brynden frowned. He may be playing both sides, or waiting for the wind to shift. Then came word from the Riverlands. Tywin Lannister had turned his host around. He was marching west, and he was bringing hell with him. Robb looked at the horizon from the tallest tower of Casterly Rock. For the first time in his campaign, the young wolf felt the pressure of the world pressing down on him. He had taken the rock. Now, he had to defend it. The air outside Casterly Rock turned colder, though it was still high summer. Clouds gathered over the sunset sea, and with them came the storm that Robb Stark had long anticipated. Tywin Lannister was on the move. Over 20,000 men marched. Under the lion banners, hardened veterans of countless battles, and leading them was the most feared general in Westeros. Tywin had abandoned his siege of Harrenhal without hesitation the moment he heard that the rock had fallen. He left garrisons behind to contain the river lords and poured all his strength westward, not just to reclaim his seat, but to crush the Stark name underfoot. Inside the rock, Robb prepared. He fortified the inner tunnels, flooded the lower mines, and trapped certain passageways. The northern men didn't understand the layout the way the Lannisters had, but they learned quickly. Sir Brynden oversaw the defenses while Robb focused on logistics. Grain had to last. Horses needed rest. Morale had to stay strong. But as days turned into weeks, the pressure built. Messages from the north became more infrequent. Rose Bolton had written once more, claiming skirmishes with Ironborn in the Stony Shore, but nothing of the Karstarks, nor of Theon Greyjoy. The silence from Winterfell was unsettling. Then came the more disturbing news from Lady Maege Mormont, who had sent a raven from Bear Island. Winterfell has burned. The Greyjoys have struck. The boy Bran missing. Rickon, too. No word from Maester Luwin. Robb was silent for a long time when he read that. When he finally spoke, he did not raise his voice. I gave Theon my trust, he said. I gave him a place among us, and this is how he repays it. Grey Wind snarled beside him, sensing the fury boiling beneath the surface. Catelyn, who had arrived days earlier to beg Robb to sue for peace, broke down in tears when she learned the fate of her younger sons. Yet even her grief could not sway Robb now. They want me broken, he said. First my father, now my brothers. Then they'll come for me. Catelyn stepped forward. And what will you become, Robb? You've won a castle but lost your home. Will vengeance build the north again? I will not stop until the north is safe, he said. And if that means turning the rock into a tomb, then so be it. He began rallying the Westerlands houses that had stayed neutral. He offered them lands, autonomy, and peace if they pledged loyalty. Some, like House Kenning and House Swift, began to waver. They feared Tywin's wrath, but also feared what would happen if Robb survived and they had done nothing. But Tywin's wrath was not far behind. His army descended like a storm, ravaging the countryside, taking the lesser keeps. Around Lannisport, surrounding the rock, supply lines were cut. The siege had begun, and Tywin was not alone. Sir Gregor Clegane returned from the Riverlands with a horde of brutal mercenaries. Randall Tarley brought southern swords. Even men from the Vale, sworn to neutrality, had begun trickling in under Lannister gold. Robb stood at the battlements one dawn and watched the red banners unfurl below. Thousands of tents, fires flickering in neat, organized rows, siege towers under construction. He felt the magnitude of what he had done and what it would cost. Let him come, Robb muttered. Let the lion charge into his den. He won't find it as welcoming as before. And then he issued a command that would change the course of the war again. Send ravens to the Iron Islands, he said to Brynden. Tell Balon Greyjoy I offer peace, if he sends me his fleet. Now. Brynden stared at him. You'd ally with the man who burned Winterfell? I'd ally with a kraken if it kept my men alive, Robb answered coldly. And Balon wants the West Coast. He can have Lannisport. For now. The gamble was enormous, but Robb was running out of time. His men were brave, but outnumbered. The rock was strong, but not unbreakable. And Tywin was coming. Every raven became a lifeline. Every day a gamble. Every night, the golden halls of Casterly Rock shook with the tension of waiting for the storm to truly begin. The siege of Casterly Rock began with fire. From the hills above Lannisport, Tywin Lannister's catapults hurled burning pitch toward the great fortress. The flames licked the stone walls but did little damage. Still, it was not about breaking the walls. It was about sending a message. Robb Stark watched the first volleys from the eastern tower. Gray wind paced beside him, restless. Below, his soldiers were already scrambling to position ballistae and counter-siege weapons. He turned to Brynden Tully. "They want to smoke us out." "They won't," Brynden replied. "But they can starve us." Robb's face was hard. "Then we bleed them first." That night, the young wolf struck back. Under cover of darkness, a small team of Northmen and Ironborn sailed out through the old smuggler's tunnel Robb had used in the initial assault. Their target, the Lannister supply line winding down from Ashmark to Tywin's camp. The attack was swift and brutal. Dozens of supply wagons were torched, horses scattered, and guards slain before the Northmen vanished back into the hills. It didn't turn the tide, but it made Tywin pause, and it wasn't the only surprise Robb had planned. A fortnight into the siege, the Ironborn fleet finally arrived. Lord Victarion Greyjoy, Balon's brother, led 30 longships around the western coast and struck Lannisport with fury. Fires spread through the docks, and the port city, unprotected and unprepared, fell in a single day. The news hit Tywin like a blade. "Greyjoy?" he muttered, reading the report by candlelight. "The wolves and krakens now dine together. He ordered Ser Adam Marbrand to reclaim the city, but the damage was done. The Lannisters had lost their greatest port, and now the sea belonged to their enemies." Inside the rock, Robb received Victarion in the Great Hall. The Ironborn Lord was tall, grim, and humorless, his hands stained with blood from battle. "You hold your end of the bargain," he said. "We've taken Lannisport. We expect the spoils." "You'll have them," Robb replied, "as long as your ships keep Tywin's reinforcements from landing." Victarion grunted. "We're no guards. We take. We don't sit." "You'll sit," Robb said, voice like steel, "or you'll lose what you've gained." The alliance was fragile, built on desperation and strategy, not trust, but for now it held. Tywin Lannister's siege lines grew tighter. He ordered new trebuchets, built, focused on pounding the rock from higher ground. His engineers mapped the fortress, identifying weaknesses. The Red Lion circled its prey, but Robb had begun another game entirely. He sent ravens north again, not just to Rose Bolton, but to Howland Reed, Lord of Greywater Watch, one of his most loyal and secretive bannermen. His message was simple. "The North is in flames. I need the truth." And another raven went east, to the Eyrie, to Lady Lysa Arryn, Catelyn's sister. "Your nephew has taken Casterly Rock. Aid us now, or the lion devours the wolf and returns to the Vale with fire." Even as the siege ground on, Robb was building alliances in every direction, but time was running thin. Inside the rock, food began to spoil. Water from the inner wells tasted of rust. The tunnels echoed with coughs. Rats grew bold. And then came word from the battlements. A rider under a white banner approaches, alone. Robb descended to meet the envoy himself. He stepped through the gates, flanked by gray wind and a pair of bannermen. The rider removed his helm. Sir Kevan Lannister, Tywin's brother. Older, seasoned, tired. "I bring terms," he said. Robb's voice was cold. "You'll find no peace here." "Not peace," Kevan said. "A warning. My brother will not stop. He will not retreat. He will die before yielding the rock to a Stark. He will burn it. And you with it." Robb stepped forward. "Then tell him this. If he brings fire, I'll answer with ice. And if I fall, I'll take the rock down with me." Kevan held his gaze. "You're your father's son. But that's not always a blessing." Then he turned and rode back into the dust and smoke of Tywin's camp. Inside Casterly Rock, the final phase had begun. The siege was closing like a fist. The next battle would decide the future of the war, and perhaps the fate of Westeros itself. The 5th week of the siege brought silence, an eerie, aching quiet that settled over Casterly Rock like a funeral shroud. The fires in the distance no longer flared as brightly. Tywin's men no longer tested the walls daily. The volleys of burning pitch had stopped. Robb Stark knew what that meant. The lion had finished circling. Now it would pounce. Inside the fortress, tension had turned to fatigue. His men were leaner now, their armor looser on their shoulders. Food was measured out by the handful. The stench of rot and damp stone thickened by the day. Even the loyalist northern warriors had begun to whisper doubts. What good was it to hold the Lannisters' pride if it became their tomb? Brynden Tully never voiced fear, but Robb saw it in his silence. Even Grey Wind was more restless, pacing the halls at night, snarling at shadows. Robb took to sleeping in his armor, knowing the next assault could come at any moment. It did not come in the way they expected. The first sign was smoke, black, thick, rising from the eastern hills. Then came the sound of drums, dozens of them. Thousands. When Robb climbed the battlements, what he saw confirmed the worst. Tywin had summoned his full strength. Reinforcements from the Reach, from the Stormlands, and even sellswords from Essos had joined his ranks. The Lannister army had swollen to over 35,000 strong, and they were preparing siege towers taller than anything seen in the West for generations, and riding among them, wearing a crimson cloak and golden armor, Jaime Lannister. Freed from captivity, released by Catelyn Stark months ago as a desperate gamble for peace. Now returned, sword in hand, smiling up at the walls of his childhood home. Robb stared down at him. Jaime met his gaze and raised a single hand in mock salute. That night, Robb called a war council. "We cannot outlast them," Brynden said, pointing at the supply counts. "They have the numbers, the food, and the patience. They'll crack us open like a nut." "Then we strike before they do," Robb replied. "How?" one bannerman asked. "They're dug in. Their archers watch every window. We can't even leave through the tunnels anymore. They've collapsed 2 of them already." Robb looked over the table, then pointed to the old mining tunnels deep beneath the rock. "We strike from below." There was a pause. Even Brynden looked uncertain. "That part of the rock hasn't been touched in centuries," he said. "It's unstable. Forgotten." "Good," Robb said. "They won't expect it. The plan was simple in concept, but deadly in execution. Robb would lead a select group through the lower tunnels, out an ancient emergency shaft that opened far from the siege camp. From there, they would flank Tywin's eastern supply line, his most vulnerable flank, and torch it. The chaos would draw Tywin's army into disarray. Meanwhile, the Ironborn would launch another raid on the southern beach, drawing even more men away. And then, in the confusion, the main host inside Casterly Rock would sally out, targeting Jaime's vanguard. It was a risk, but one Robb was willing to take. As the sun set, he said his farewells to his mother, to his commanders. Grey Wind would go with him. He wore no crown, only his sword and the armor of a Stark. He had stopped being a boy long ago. "I don't need to win this war today," Robb told Brynden. "I just need to make them bleed." The descent into the mines was suffocating. The tunnels were narrow, half-flooded, filled with mold and old bones. Many turned back in fear, but Robb led on, Grey Wind always just ahead. After hours of crawling and scraping through stone, they emerged, just before dawn, onto a wind-swept ridge overlooking the Lannister rear. And then they struck. Fire arced through the air, torches hurled into wagons of oil and grain. Men screamed, horses broke free, tents collapsed. Robb's men, cloaked in shadow and fury, ripped through the unprotected line with wild precision. Far to the south, Victarion's ships launched volleys into the siege towers by the beach. Explosions rocked the ground. Confusion spread like wildfire. Jaime, ever the bold knight, tried to rally his men, but he hadn't seen the real threat until the gates of Casterly Rock opened wide and the northern host surged out, screaming like wolves. The battle was not a clean one. There was no single heroic charge, no perfect maneuver. It was chaos, blood, thunder. Robb rejoined the battle at the height of the confusion. Gray wind at his side, carving through Lannister soldiers to reach the golden armor of Jaime Lannister. The two locked eyes again, this time with swords drawn. And in that moment, the future of two great houses teetered on the edge of steel. The clang of steel rang louder than any war horn as Robb Stark and Jaime Lannister clashed beneath the shadow of Casterly Rock. Jaime fought like a man born to it, blades flashing, feet moving with deadly grace. Even in the chaos of battle, he was a storm of golden motion, each stroke precise, ruthless. Robb, younger and less experienced, relied on instinct, strength, and the unrelenting rhythm of northern swordplay. His blows came fast and heavy, like the heartbeat of a winter storm. Around them, the battle howled. The Lannister lines, surprised and scattered by the three-pronged assault, scrambled to regroup. Fires lit the camps. Victarion's Ironborn roared through the southern breach. Northmen burst from the gates with axes in hand, and gray wind carved a path of savagery through red-cloaked soldiers. But in the center of it all, it was Stark versus Lannister. "You should have stayed in the north, boy," Jaime sneered between strikes. "The rock is death for wolves." Robb said nothing. He parried a feint and struck hard at Jaime's exposed side. The Kingslayer barely twisted in time, but the blow grazed his armor, drawing the first blood. Jaime's smile faded. Their blades locked. Face to face now, breathing heavy, Robb whispered, "I'm not fighting to win. I'm fighting so my people live." Jaime pushed back with a snarl, launching a furious flurry of strikes. Robb fell back, absorbing them one by one. Then, gray. Wind leapt in from the side, forcing Jaime to stumble. Robb seized the moment, sweeping Jaime's legs from under him. The Kingslayer fell, hard, sword knocked from his grip. Robb raised his blade. "Yield," he ordered. Jaime looked up, face bloodied, breathing ragged. For a heartbeat, it seemed he might refuse, but then his eyes darted across the battlefield, where the golden lion banners were faltering, and his voice came bitter and low. "I yield." The fighting didn't stop immediately, but word spread fast. Jaime Lannister had fallen. Robb's bannermen rallied around him, pushing the Lannisters back beyond the hills. Tywin's siege collapsed within hours. At first light, the Red Lion host was in full retreat, harried by Ironborn raids and Northman skirmishers. Robb held the field. Casterly Rock stood when Tywin Lannister heard that his son had been captured. Again, and this time by the same boy who'd once released him, he said nothing. He simply turned, walked into his command tent, and began drafting orders to burn the Riverlands. But inside Casterly Rock, the victory was not without cost. Thousands lay dead or dying. The mines beneath the fortress were damaged, flooded from Robb's maneuver through the ancient shafts. Many of the surviving Westerlanders now hated the Starks even more bitterly. Yet the war had shifted. The lion had bled. They chained Jaime in the same golden cell that once held rebellious bannermen. He did not beg. He waited, watching, planning. Robb, meanwhile, walked the silent corridors of the Rock at night, restless. Victory had been bought, at a high price, and still the North was in chaos. Winterfell was ash. Bran and Rickon were still missing. Theon had vanished into the north with a host of Ironborn deserters, and worse, Rose Bolton had sent no reply in weeks. Robb stood before, a great map in the main hall, hands clenched behind his back. "We hold the west," Brynden said from behind him, "but we've lost the north. Without it, there is no crown, no kingdom, Only another lord playing at war. Robb nodded slowly. Then we take it back. He ordered Jaime to be kept alive as a bargaining piece. He wrote letters, one to the Night's Watch, seeking news of Jon Snow, another to Lady Mormont, asking for her truth and her allegiance, and one more to Balon Greyjoy. You have Lannisport, Robb wrote. If you hold it and hold true, then I will not march on you when this war is done. But betray me, and the sea will boil. He sent the letter with his seal, the direwolf in black wax. Outside, the winds blew harder now, bringing with them the first snows from the north. Winter was coming for everyone, and Robb Stark, king in the west, prepared for the final march. The first flakes of snow fell upon the golden towers of Casterly rock, melting against the stone as if the fortress itself rejected the chill of winter. But winter no longer asked permission. Robb Stark stood in the high chamber once used by Lord Tywin as a study. It overlooked the sea, now dark and angry with crashing waves. The room had been stripped of its lion banners. In their place, the dire wolf flew, gray on white. Word had spread through Westeros like wildfire. The young wolf had captured the rock, defeated Jaime Lannister, and broken the siege. Some called it the boldest victory since Robert's rebellion. Others whispered that it was the beginning of the end for the lions, but Robb knew better. The war was not won, it had only transformed. The West, though shaken, was not conquered. Loyalist houses still resisted him in the mountains. The mines beneath the rock, once a source of Lannister power, had flooded and collapsed in part. The gold veins, the very soul of the Lannister legacy, were now inaccessible, and the north remained a wound that refused to close. A raven arrived on the fourth day of snow, bearing a torn message from Deepwood Motte. Rose Bolton has declared for the Iron Throne. He has taken Winterfell. The flayed man flies over the gates. Robb crushed the parchment in his fist. So it was true. Rose had betrayed him. The man his father had raised to command had now seized the Stark home in the chaos left by Theon's treachery and Ramsay's madness. The north was under occupation by both Boltons and scattered Ironborn. Everything we've done here, Robb muttered, means nothing if we lose the north. Brynden Tully, ever his shadow, stood beside him. Then we take it back, not with ships or skirmishes, with fire, with fury, the way the Starks used to. But not like the Boltons, Robb said. Not with flayed skin and fear. The North remembers. We'll remind them why. He summoned his bannermen, those who still remained, those who had bled and survived the siege. Umber, Manderly, Glover, even the hesitant Westerlands houses who now feared the Starks more than they hated them. With Jaime Lannister as hostage, he held leverage enough to delay another Lannister offensive. But war demanded blood. Again. He wrote to the Vale once more, to Lysa Arryn and her son. Your nephew calls. Your blood calls. The Boltons have betrayed the North. Will you hide behind your cliffs forever? He received no answer. The Vale remained silent. But another reply came, from the Riverlands. Edmure Tully, still holding Riverrun, had fended off the phrase. Lord Walder, enraged by Robb's refusal to honor the marriage pact, had begun plotting, but his power waned as the tide turned. Some river lords began defecting again, encouraged by Robb's victory at the Rock. The Starks still had allies. If they moved quickly, Robb made a plan. He would leave a trusted commander, Maegg Mormont, to hold the Rock and manage the uneasy Westerlands. He would take his remaining strength along with the Ironborn fleet and sail north. If the Neck could not be passed, he would go by sea to White Harbor and march on Winterfell from the east. I won't let Winterfell fall twice, he told his mother, who still remained at his side. Not while I draw breath. But Cat's eyes were full of grief. And what will you find, Robb? That castle is only stone. Your brothers are gone. Your sisters are missing. Your father is dust. Then I will fight for the living, he said. I will fight for what's left, and I will bury what was lost. The preparations took weeks. Victarion Greyjoy, still holding Lannisport, demanded new terms in exchange for escorting Robb's army. Robb promised him salt plunder from the coasts of the Vale if the war went in their favor. For now, Victarion agreed, more out of war hunger than loyalty. As the Stark fleet set sail, carrying the battered but unbroken remnants of the northern host, Robb looked back at the rock one last time. He had conquered the seat of the richest house in Westeros. He had held it against fire and steel, but it was never his true home. Winterfell waited, broken, claimed by traitors, but not forever. The sea journey north was perilous. Storms racked the iron-borne ships. One of the Glover galleys went down near Fair Isle, but Robb pressed on, passing the smoking sea in the east, nearing White Harbor. It was there, just before landing, that he received a final message, one that chilled his blood more than any betrayal, a raven from Castle Black. Your brother Jon is Lord Commander, but the wall is under siege. Something is coming, not men, not kings, something worse. Robb held the letter in silence. I went south to avenge my father, he said, but the true war may be waiting in the snow. And with that, the wolves returned north. Snow blanketed the shore as Robb Stark stepped off the ship and onto the frozen docks of White Harbor. It had been months since he had seen the land of his birth. Now, winter had claimed it. The sky was a dull gray, heavy with more snow to come. The people who greeted him wore expressions not of celebration, but of exhaustion and quiet hope. Lord Wyman Manderly, heavier than when they last met but still dignified, knelt before him. Your Grace, he said, we held on, but the Boltons bleed us daily. They think fear will keep us loyal. They forget what the North is, Robb replied, helping him to his feet. We don't kneel to flayed men. We bury them. The war for the North began at dawn 2 days later. Robb's army, no longer vast but hardened and fiercely loyal, marched from White Harbor through the eastern woods. They met resistance immediately. Bolton scouts, iron-born raiders, burned villages where the people had refused to bend the hide knee. Each mile they marched, more northerners joined them. House Hornwood, House Tallheart. Even scattered Karstark soldiers, ashamed of their lord's betrayal, returned to Robb's banner. The North, starved and bloodied, still remembered its king, and then came the strangest of all. From the swamps of the Neck, Howland Reed emerged at last. He brought no large army, only green-cloaked crannogmen and a message. You'll never win by marching on Winterfell. Robb frowned. Then how? Let it rot from within, Reed said. I know its secret paths. I can open the way. With the Reeds' help, Robb bypassed Bolton's outer patrols and closed on Winterfell in silence. At night, fires burned in the distance. Bolton men dragging villagers from their homes, demanding loyalty with blade and torch. But in the woods, shadows watched them. And then the wolves struck. The first battle was not at the gates, but in the snow. Reed's men guided Robb's strike force to a Bolton encampment northeast of the keep. They slaughtered the sentries in their sleep. Not a single Stark soldier fell. Word of the king in the North's return spread like wildfire. Inside Winterfell, Ramsay Bolton laughed when the raven came. Let the wolf come. I'll flay him like his father. Rose was more cautious. He tightened the guard and prepared for siege, but something gnawed at him. Robb was smarter than this. He had already taken the rock. He wouldn't play into their hands again, and Rose was right. Robb never laid siege. He infiltrated. 2 nights before the full moon, Howland Reed led a small force, including Robb, Greywind, and Brynden Tully, through an old escape tunnel beneath the Godswood. It had been sealed long ago, but the roots of the weirwood had cracked the stone. They entered Winterfell from within. What followed was chaos. At midnight, the dire wolf's howl rang through the snow-covered courtyards. Fires broke out in the barracks. Stark loyalists rose in the shadows and slit the throats of sleeping Boltons. Ramsay awoke to find his kennel on fire, his hounds torn loose. One of them, crazed and hungry, tore into a Bolton guard. By the time Roose Bolton reached the great hall, it was too late. Robb stood there, sword drawn, Greywind beside him, eyes alight with fury. "I should have killed you at the Twins," Rose said calmly. "Would have saved us both the trouble. You burned my home. You murdered my brothers. You stabbed my house in the heart." Rose only shrugged. "Power doesn't care about your ghost, boy." Robb didn't reply. He simply raised his sword and swung. Roose Bolton died with silence on his lips. As for Ramsay, he was found the next morning, bloodied and cornered in the stables. When the guards tried to capture him, he screamed and lunged. He took 3 men down with him, but not Robb. Robb himself dragged him into the courtyard, where the Stark banners flew again. A crowd gathered. "You flayed our kin," Robb said. "You laughed as you burned children." Ramsay spat blood. "I made the North strong. You made it bleed." Robb turned to the gathered men. "The North remembers. Let it witness justice." Greywind stepped forward, and the screams that followed did not last long. By nightfall, Winterfell was reclaimed. Robb entered the broken hall alone, knelt before the heart tree in the Godswood, and bowed his head. Snow fell silently around him. There was no cheering. No songs, only the wind. Catelyn Stark had not lived to see it. Arya was still missing. Bran and Rickon were lost to the wilds. Sansa was a ghost in the south. Jon was at the wall, where darker things stirred. But Robb Stark had done what many had thought impossible. He had conquered Casterly Rock. He had broken the lion. He had returned to Winterfell, and in the end, he had not won the Iron Throne. He had restored the North. A crown of ice, not gold, rested on his brow. And in the silence of winter, the wolves howled once more.